Welcome, listeners, to a realm where shadows dance and whispers echo. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and this is Quills and Chills, the podcast that brings you face to face with the masterminds behind the macabre. In each episode, we journey into the minds of horror writers and filmmakers to uncover the secrets lurking within their tales of terror. From classic tales to modern nightmares, we'll traverse the corridors of the human psyche and unravel the threads of dread that keep us turning the pages or sitting out there in the dark. Welcome to Quills and Chills. Hello and welcome back to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and today I am talking with author Sam Ripley about his chilling new book, or at least new here in the US. It's called The Rule of Three. Sam has crafted this amazing story that blends together a little bit of paranoia, a little bit of grief, and a whole hell of a lot of suspense into what I would definitely call a page-turning nightmare. So I am excited to have you here on the show, Sam. So welcome to the show.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You got it. Well, we dive into this book. I would love to
Yeah.
get to know you a little bit. So
Okay, sure thing.
my first question is always how did you venture into writing? What sparked the writing bug for you?
Okay, the very English answer is the absolute absence of all other talents and skills. So it was there was no choice really. It was being a writer or nothing. So that's we like a bit of self-deprecation here. But yeah, always a daydreamer. That's I think I spent more time staring at the ceiling at school than staring at books.
You and me both.
Yeah. So yeah.
So what's your
So
process like when you write a little bit? Are you
oh,
are you somebody that you jump in with both feet? Are you obsessively plotting things out and planning things, or is it a little bit of both?
well, let's say my intention is to obsessively plan. That's the goal, to be organized. But yeah, that's not my personality. So there is no process. Mm, I keep trying to develop a process. If you could give me a process, or if somebody could message me with a process, I would love to try one because yeah, what I'm doing is in the lap of the gods.
Well, I can tell you, Sam, having talked to quite a few writers, it's always the same story for everybody. There's
Yeah,
no process.
okay.
They're like,
Yeah.
I'm blessed that it gets done. So
Well, yeah, it's yeah, okay. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone in this. Yeah.
definitely not. So this book is really great. It dives into a little bit about urban legends and some horror and stuff. And I'm kind of curious what brought you. I guess this is kind of our segue into talking about the book, but I would love to know sort of
Okay.
what intrigued you to talk about this urban legend, the Rule of Three.
Do you know what? Is an extremely good question, but it's one of those like the journey to write this book was like a long one. Only after writing it did I remember a story when I was from like my long, long time ago on the misty shores of Great Britain. When I was at school, I remember very distinctly. There's a scene in the book where a character says, "Oh, don't walk over three drains. It's unlucky." Like a row of three drain covers. And that happened to me when I was like an impressionable teenager, maybe like 12, or not technically a teenager, but yeah, young and impressionable. And for some reason, it just stuck in my head. And like I say, I only thought about this after writing the book, after like being asked these kind of questions. And I remember I really took it seriously, even though I wasn't really superstitious. But it was like probably like a kind of peer group kind of thing, impressionable. And one day walking home from school, my brother, who was 1 year older, so we were kind of mostly the same. He was just a little bit wiser and more grounded. And he was about to walk over three drains, and I told him not to, and he just laughed at me. So I shoved him out of the way to save him, and he tumbled into the road and almost got hit by a truck. Like just and yeah, so I almost killed him trying to save him from
Trying to
the
save
bad
him. That's
the bad luck. And like I say, I never thought about it like in the last 30 years, but it occurred to me, oh my God, yeah. So I think I was a lot more superstitious and a lot more susceptible to those ideas when I was younger. And I found it kind of fascinating. And there's the whole idea about, bad things happen in threes, and we have so many superstitions just in Western culture in general. But I find it fascinating how, like in that story, believing in something almost created the bad luck in the first place. And I find that a kind of fascinating circle, the power of belief, the power of manifest destiny. So, whilst that that story was not in my mind when I wrote the book, it must have been there at a sort of subconscious level, that calculating in my brain, shall we say. But yeah, everyone loves a good. We call them urban myths in this country rather than urban legends. But yeah, just that kind of stuff is fascinating. But I don't. But because I think I'm quite a logical person. I'm always thinking, well, why? Why do we say these things? Where does it come from? Why do we have these stories, these legends, these myths? Um, so yeah, that's just a kind of point of fascination. I think I don't have an answer to that question, by the way, before you ask me. But
No,
yeah,
it's actually great because it's for exactly that reason. When this book came to me, I was
okay,
like, I just saw the excerpt for it, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so in. I have to like, I
okay,
just
yeah,
from the get, and so I was really interested in it. So tell us a little bit about what the book is about.
okay. It's one of those books where I'm very hesitant to describe the plot in too much detail because it's very easy to spoil. What I tend to say is that the main character comes to believe that seemingly unrelated tragedies are connected. And this belief is so strong, she thinks if she can't work out why these people around her keep dying, that she will be the next one to die. So that's my kind of spoiler free summation, if you will. And it's written in a journal format. One character refers to it as a survival guide. So the main character is talking to the reader as if they're experiencing this strange phenomenon and trying to explain what they've been through and hopefully how to survive it.
I loved that actually, and I will be. As I've gone through my questions here, I'm like, I have to be careful about spoilers. So, but the good thing is it's not live, so I can edit anything out if we need to. But
Okay, and I think my point in spoilers is it's like if I'm watching a film trailer, I stop it after 30 seconds before things. If I like it, I think okay, I'm sold. I'm not going to let it spoil it for me. So I think whenever there's a kind of review, a preview, an interview, you go into it, it may get spoiled, and the point you're interested, that's the point. Press pause, read the
yep,
book, come back, watch the rest, or whatever the combination there is. So, well, I don't want to spoil anything too much. It's a twisty book, people. It's weird and
it's very
creepy.
twisty, and I love that.
And if that sounds good, we'll go and read it now and then come back later.
Yeah, for sure. So I will say this: I think there
Yeah.
are three different distinct perspectives on this story, as you said. I'm curious about how you approach developing these unique voices and what challenges you faced in sort of m- making sure they each added a very different but also very effective layer to the overall story.
Okay. Well, it was difficult, first of all, because normally in a novel you have one protagonist, one. You may have multiple points of view, but you tend to have one protagonist. So that is a challenge in of itself. So having three narrators is, I don't want to say I bit off more than I could chew, but it took a long time to get that balance right because in one sense they have to be one single guide, lead character, one narrator, one protagonist, but at three different personalities at the same time. So it was a seesaw of trying to balance those concerns. Everybody needs to be different and unique, both in their experiences, but the way they share those experiences. Because not only do we have different personalities, the way you and I would tell a joke would be different. So that was important. So I'm not sure how I approached that, but I just knew they were the kind of the goalposts. They had to form a coherent narrator, a coherent protagonist, but also differentiate themselves from one another. So yeah, it was a lot of back and forth. And as a writer, we exist in our own heads with our own perspectives. And so having other people read and comment was really useful because occasionally, whilst with the best will in the world of trying to have distinctive voices, there might be carryovers and not necessarily turns of phrase, but quirks of language. And so having other people go, oh, that line sounds a little bit like that other character, and then being able to then tweak that, that's really, I think, really important. I think any writing is editing, but we are full of our own biases as writers, so we need an outside perspective. So having that really helps.
That's great. You had mentioned earlier the way this is sort of weaved together is through, in a sense, journaling. And I'm kind of curious what made you decide on that particular narrative structure? I think it works great. I mean, I loved it, and so that's why I want to know why you like. How did you land there? I guess is the better way to ask that question.
Okay, right. Well, so when I was younger, I had many pet peeves about books. Right, so this is where it begins. It's not necessarily the full story, but if I read a first-person narration book, I would think to myself, how is this story being told? Why is this? Is this someone talking to me? How does it exist? This book? Why are they telling it to me in chapters? Why aren't they holding back this information I need to know about the story? It didn't make sense. Like from the medium itself, I always found it problematic. I think part of this was I was beginning as a writer and finding my own feet and trying to rationalize the process. If it's like an omnipresent narrator who's not really there, it's like you're experiencing the story. If someone's saying I, why? Why is that happening? So I think part of it was that initial prejudice way back when I was younger, thinking if it's first person narration, I need to understand why it is. Like, why is someone telling me their story? And why are they telling it the way they're telling it? Because a novel doesn't make any sense telling a story if you're telling your own story. People wouldn't talk like that. So I know we're going to get into the weeds a little bit with that, but that was the basis. For a long time, I was a little bit biased against first person narration. I didn't love to read those kind of books. And so with the rule of three, it felt very, very natural and very, very quickly when Amy's talking, she is talking to you as the reader. She's trying to explain what happened. She says, I'm going to tell you what happened to me, how it happened, as it happened, when it happened, because you need to, in essence, experience the same thing if you're going to learn. So it almost felt that was the only way to tell the story, that because the characters' experiences are so fundamental to how they tell their story, if it's a third person omnipresent narrator, surely that would just fill in the blanks. There'll be less story to tell.
Right.
If I'm making sense.
You are making perfect sense.
Okay, so yeah, so there's a combination of factors, and of course, because it's the rule of three, the way I think of it is, again, the book in itself is the journal. It is the survival guide. It is the thing that the characters in the book talk about. It's not just a piece of entertainment media. The book in itself is in the book. So yeah, I love all that. I mean, it's not fourth wall breaking, but playing with the format of the book. That was like half the appeal of writing it. That I'm not just writing a story. I'm telling it in a different way. I'm playing with the format, and that's. I mean, from a very selfish perspective, that just makes it much more fun to write than a regular novel. It's because you can break the rules.
I loved it, and I love the structure. And I guess I hesitate to call it the device, but it's like the structure of a way to tell the story, because it really allowed each of the characters, as they began to sort of question what was happening around them and trying to figure things out. It just was a really great way to just let it play out without a lot of what you said about, why is this happening and the way it's happening. I loved how it was just sort of put together in sort of the journal aspect.
Good. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased.
Um, This one is a little more because each one, I guess, in a sense, it's a short story because there's the three main characters. Is it more challenging for you as a writer to create these engaging and relatable characters within the constraints of a shorter individual story arc in that
Yes.
way?
Yes. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. I mean, every chapter in the book is. I don't want to say three because that seems a bit deliberate, but
Three
there
on three
are.
on three.
Yeah, exactly. There are multiple things that didn't make the cut just from a pure time restricted. On one level, it would be great if it was 900 pages, the novel, and each story was a novel's worth of story in itself. But like a movie, like any other kind of media format, there are restraints. If the more characters you have, the more story there is to tell. I mean, Game of Thrones and all that is a great example where the books are. You could murder people with those books. They are so massive. So yeah, definitely trying to really boil down what that character story is about in a succinct manner. It's very difficult, definitely, but also not sort of cheating those characters, but telling their stories properly. I think it's just finding the right balance of sort of brevity and not wasting the time that they have, and that yeah, it's brutal sort of cutting out moments or even just thoughts, things that you think the character is experiencing, but the book's getting too long, can't be too long. You are restricted. Yeah, very difficult, very difficult. And when I was writing it, I think I didn't really fully appreciate that. I was very quickly drawn to the idea of three narrators and that fit the theme and so on. But the practicalities of that, yeah, that was a big challenge. And whilst it is not a long novel by any stretch, it is typical sort of novel length. And like you say, therefore, if you have three characters, they are having less time.
Right.
Yeah, just very difficult, very difficult. Lot of brutal editing choices.
I was going to say, I would think that it would probably be very beneficial, as you said earlier, to have that editor with you, that person that you can rely on, right? That
Yeah.
helps you sort of keep that narrowed in and focused on that. So, I don't think this is a spoiler, but if it is, again,
Yeah,
I can fix that. But I loved the one thing I loved is across all three stories, there are certain characters that keep showing up, although you don't always know that. You don't know that until you get to the end. And I absolutely loved that. How did those characters, again, you don't have to say who, but how did those characters evolve for you as a writer? Did you know they were always going to be there, or did it just sort of weave itself into the story?
I think no.
I
I
love
didn't
that.
know. I didn't always know. I think any story evolves in the telling, and whilst I had a pretty clear idea by the time I sort of sat down to write in earnest what I was trying to write, a bit like the old adage, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. No idea survives first contact with a blank page. So a lot of what happens sort of later on is an evolutionary process, is the back and forth. Certain characters that are seem more or less important at one point. At that point of writing, I might not have known in that exact moment if that character was coming back or not, because again, it's through the character's lens. So who they see as important sometimes is not necessarily important to the plot, but it's important. They're important to that person in that moment. So yeah, and again, editing, and I always say that like the best ideas come at the last possible moment, and sometimes it's like the light bulb goes off, and then there's a mad scramble to twist and change and make that idea work. So it's a combination definitely. And when writing, I might, again, I don't name names, but you write one character and then in that moment they become more significant as a writer to you. You think, oh, well, now I want to know more about them. I want them to come back. I feel like that's not enough.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, I think it works well to that point, and we talked about this a little bit up front, but there are definitely some very twisty little plot lines, especially as we get towards the end of the book. And I got to say, I love that. I'm always in for a big twist, and not only did you twist it once, you twisted it a few times. So I was like, okay,
Well,
I didn't see that one.
I think you'll find there are 3 twists actually.
Exactly. Exactly. So 3 and 3. It's the way to go. Did you always know that you were going to do that, or how did that? I mean, I know that writing is a process and all of that, but I'm just kind of curious. Sometimes some people I talk to, they always know the end when they start. So I'm just kind of curious if you knew the ending when you started.
Well, long before I actually wrote the book, I wrote not one but 2 outlines for the story at different points in my career, and at both points the ending was different. In the first outline that I ever wrote, there was one character and very different tone of story. If the sort of the theme, the hope was still the same, and again, a few years later, another outline, another version of the story, different other ending. So when I was actually writing the book, I I had the ending in mind, but not necessarily how to tell it. Yeah, it was again dodging the whole spoiler thing,
Right.
but originally the ending sort of happens earlier. I mean, you'll know what I'm going to refer to, and the sort of the last 2 or 3 chapters didn't really exist, and it was because again, as you say, as I said before, it's through the character's own eyes and through their experiences and their biases, and what one character is describing is not necessarily what is actually happening, it's what they're thinking is happening. And then it was up to the reader to sort of realize this, to read between the lines. That was the ending I was always had. But over time it kind of evolved and answered more questions because whilst the ending there's still some ambiguity in the ending and the events that lead to the end, there was much more originally, and that was, it seemed to me, the point of the book. But also,
I will
yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, but as I said before, the writer is not always the best judge of these things. So other people didn't necessarily have the same opinion of the ending that I did. So yeah, there was modifications and explanations and things over time, and it still confuses some people. But it's not my intention to confuse, but there is a certain responsibility on the reader to join a couple of the dots at the same time. So I hope no one reads it when they're really tired late at night, just before bed. At least stay the very end until the next morning for a coffee when you're fully sharp.
I will say there were a couple of as we're going through those last 3 twists, they were like, oh, okay, I thought I had this figured out. I did not. And I was like, yeah. And but as we got to the end, I love the ending. So
Okay,
I love where how it ended and all of that. And it brings me to my next question, and it's a
okay.
big one. Is there a
Go.
sequel coming?
Well, no. Is the short. Yeah, I wrote it purely as a standalone. However, you're not the only person who has said this. So, and I like that. I like that the people want more of the story because, and again, this wasn't my intention. Whilst I wanted the reader to be involved in the story, and the whole point, the character talking to the reader as if the reader's involved and almost a character in themselves. So it worked that my intention was that people see another story because I didn't myself. So, but yeah, maybe that will happen further down the line.
I'm going to throw it out there for the universe here, but maybe there's a world where fan fiction takes over. And,
Oh well, yes, that's
and you can
yeah.
bring that journal to life, as it were. So that's the challenge I'm throwing out to the audience. Do it. Go do it.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's a very, very pointed and astute little comment. I like that. You definitely paid attention.
For sure. So Sam, what are you planning next? What's on the horizon for you?
Okay, so I have just delivered my next novel, which is another standalone. And yeah, I can't say too much about it at the moment because it's not been edited yet. So there'll be a process of changes. But yeah, so that's what will happen. I will receive notes from publishers and they will tell me where I have misstepped and I will correct and so on and so forth. It's like a tennis game,
exactly.
Serving the ball back and forth. So yeah, and yeah, I'm not even sure. I mean, I have a title, but I'm not sure if that will stick. So I don't think it's worth saying yet. But
well, I'm a fan, so I'll definitely keep an eye out for sure.
Well, hopefully you can have me back when the next book comes out.
I absolutely will. That's a standing invite. You have it. So
done. You're a gentleman. Thank you. I look forward to it.
So, all right. Well, the book is called The Rule of Three. It's available everywhere now. As we always like to say here at Quills and Chills, please support your local bookstores as much as possible. And Sam, how can our audience find you on social media?
Okay, so I'm Sam Ripley Books on the usual socials. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X. I can't call it X. I don't know.
I say Twitter.
All those things. You say Twitter as well, yeah. And yeah. I'm sure I'll get dragged into TikTok at some point, despite my.
I've just started venturing over there
How
myself.
do you? Well, okay. Well, since you dip your toes in first, maybe I'll jump in afterwards.
So. Yeah, I'm figuring it out. So we're getting there.
Okay.
But I'll throw the socials up into the show notes. It'll also I'll throw them on screen for you as well. So.
All right, great. Thank you.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for talking to me today. Like I said, you do have a standing invite, so I will keep an eye out. I am following you on socials. So when the next book is out, we'll talk again. So, thank you so much
for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Got it. All right, guys. We'll see you next time on Quills and Chills. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Quills and Chills. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the mysterious and the haunted. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to support us by subscribing on your preferred podcast platform and leaving us a rating or review, because your feedback helps keep those chills running down both our spines. And feel free to share the show with your favorite fellow horror enthusiasts. Also, if you guys have any spooky stories, strange encounters, or paranormal experiences of your own, I'd love to hear them. Reach out to me on social media or email me at quillsandchillspodcast@gmail.com. Who knows? Your story might end up on a very special episode. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I will see you back here next time on Quills and Chills. Bye, y'all.